Michael Cullen is a serial tax cut canceller. Tax cut canceller.
Tax cut
Canceller. Actually, canceller. Actually, comments I made. Change
the way we do things as a country.
N-O. No.
I think it's pretty clear, no.
An old-fashioned concept.
Trust. Army-style correction camps. Army-style correction camps. Style correction. Canceller.
3 strikes and you're out. 3 strikes. 3 strikes. 3.
Our aim is for young New Zealanders to go and to stay there for their lifetime.
The 3rd strike, you're out.
We're running the numbers through our spreadsheets. 2 plus 2 are 1. No, none. 1. No, none. 1. No, none.
We've seen some strange developments in politics.
Let me say one thing. You've got to have the man or the woman to do the job.
In the last 9 years...
Flip-flops.
The man or the woman...
Flip-flops.
The man or the woman...
Flip-flops.
The man or the woman to do the job.
Helen Clark's boyfriend.
When was the last time you went to the dentist?
With due respect, Helen, I'm not your boyfriend, that's for sure.
Dream on, John.
Hello and welcome to the Media7 Election Special. We're delighted to be with you. In this gentle hour between the closing of the polls and the delivery of the results, we'll have the highlights of a 3-course lunch with 3 men who have served spin in elections past. Simon Pound heads north for an exclusive look at the domain of the Māori Party's Hone Harawira, and we'll be analysing the campaign in the media and the media in the campaign with broadcaster turned lawyer Linda Clark, unionist and former MP Lila Harry and journalist and former MP Deborah Covington. Welcome to you all, ladies. The first thing I feel I should ask you is, have any of you looked at the campaign and thought you'd like to be back in the tent?
No way. Not at all.
Is that perhaps because it's been perceived as being a dull campaign? That seems to be the received wisdom. Do you think it's been a dull campaign?
I think it's been an uninspiring campaign, and in part I think there are 3 ingredients that have played a role there. One is the Electoral Finance Act, which has really put a dampener on debate.
But how much has that changed things? What have we been missing that would have been there?
I live in Oharia, Belmont, for my sins, and in my letterbox I've had 1 single flyer in the course of the campaign. We've got hardly any billboards in the electorate, and we've had 1 electorate meeting, 1 public meeting. That is not a free and open democracy. There's not a debate. I've got mothers at the school gate when I pick up my kids at 3 o'clock who have been asking me the name of candidates. That is absolutely hopeless. Partly I think that's about the Electoral Finance Act.
Do you agree that that's the EFA that's made it a muted campaign?
I don't think there's anything in the EFA that's made a difference to parties' ability to campaign for themselves, for the party vote and in the electorate. So perhaps your problem in Oharia Belmont is more people having reached a conclusion about what the outcome was going to be without and not getting in there and fighting a campaign. I think the 4-week sort of official election campaign has been, somewhat quiet and a lot quieter than, campaigns I remember being directly involved in. But it feels to me like it's been an awfully long election campaign. There's been a bit of a focus.
It's actually been a very short one.
Well, it's been a short, not even particularly intense final run. But, there's been a hard campaign being run for the last 2 years, it seems to me. And a lot of that has been extremely negative. The negative attacks on Labor, particularly for their support of Sue Bradford's bill, the negative attacks on various parties for their support for the Electoral Finance Act. It's been quite a long election campaign, and I think people ran out of steam in the last 4 weeks.
What do you make of that, Deborah?
Linda's right. The EFA has terrified candidates as to how much they can spend. I actually live in the country, and I don't think any rural people have received any information at all. So they're sadly misinformed. And I think the reason why it seems like a long campaign, again, the EFA kicked in January, and after January the 1st, I think it was, that's when formally what was 3 months goes right back to then. So we feel like we've been in. But I don't think it has been a lacklustre campaign. I think that probably because the minor parties have been, a lot of them have been ignored in their policies, and it's been a presidential style campaign in a way has turned some people off because they've got tired of that day after day. And I think that one criticism of the media is that they didn't drill into A, the minor parties, and B, some of the MPs or candidates further down lists in in the two major parties to see who we might have as cabinet ministers.
The reporting of electorate races almost didn't exist. The one very good effort that I saw was Selwyn Manning on scoop.co.nz, but apart from that, I have no idea what's going on.
Well, this is about the media coming to terms with MMP, and I mean, I covered the 1996 election, which was the first MMP election, and to a large extent we covered that as two elections. We covered a lot of the electorates because we still thought they were important, and we covered the party vote as a separate story, if you like. And since 1996, as the electorate and as journalists have become more familiar with MMP, that way of reporting has changed too. And this election, you're right, there's been hardly any coverage about the electorates. And I think that the media has let voters down in that regard, and it's been really hard to see behind the pictures. But I agree with Deborah, and one person I would have liked to have seen profiled is Stephen Joyce. Stephen Joyce is high up on the National Party list. He's their campaign. He runs their campaign.
Tipped to be a minister.
He will go straight to cabinet. Yes. He will go straight to cabinet.
But we know nothing
about him. He has no mandate. His mandate doesn't exist because he's on the list. I mean, I know that's the theory. But none of us know anything about this guy, and he's going straight from business into cabinet, and nobody's bothered to profile him. I think that's just a real, they've dropped the ball there.
Well, we're about to go to the first course of our lunch special. And now, if the walls of Wellington's Tenakori Bistro could talk, they'd probably be inclined to keep it to themselves. But on Thursday, over lunch, I invited two former Prime Ministerial Press Secretaries, Richard Griffin and Mike Munro, and former National Party Chief of Staff, Richard Long, to open up on how it really is in the tent. For entrees, we also looked at this year's campaign.
It's quite a lot of fun watching it from the outside, actually.
I was going to ask you all about that,
actually. On the
actually.
inside for several elections.
Yeah, so there's no urge to want to be inside the tent?
No,
not at all.
Not really.
It's incestuous. No, it's very, very healthy to be outside looking in, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
And a lot more fun. John Key has been the main card, and the only card they've appeared to play, and it's been the most disciplined from National anyway, the most disciplined, the most controlled campaign from National I've ever seen.
They've been criticised for being wishy-washy, but the reasoning there was they don't want to frighten the horses.
Yeah.
The Australian, British, American attack advert scene was not the thing for National this time, but I agree, it was the thing for Labor. I mean, they had their policy.
They had to go down that
their
path.
polling told them they had to damage Key.
Exactly. They had to take him down a peg or two.
Yeah,
And negative campaigning can work.
I take your point, well, I think that was bad advice. Because why not forget about Key to a large extent and say, this is what you're going to get, a recycled, rehashed, reheated bunch of folk from the Bolger and the Shipley regime, and leave Key out of the equation, because honestly, I don't think anyone in this country believes seriously that he's a bad man.
How were you in the hot seat, have handled Lockwood and Morris and their unfortunate...
With great difficulty.
What would you have
the
done?
damage was done. I thought the Nats handled Lockwood as well as you could.
Yeah.
I've often wondered though if Key
sacrificial
secretly in his own bedroom late at night doing cartwheels, because in a sense if he does get over the line and he fronts a new cabinet after the election, as a lot of those folk are going to have to disappear. He has to politically let Lockwood and Morris and two or three others I would have thought go. And this allows him to do that.
Their first debate, I think, was quite a revelation for a lot of people, because the expectations of Key were not particularly high in terms of his, debating ability up against the master debater Alan Clark. And he, he showed that he could match her blow for blow.
I don't think he is a nice, smiley man that shakes hands at the front of it. I think he's a really determined.
He can be tough.
Yeah. No one comes through the ranks of the National Party, particularly, that quickly, that determinedly, unless you're a really good politician, and more importantly, you know how to make alliances. I think he's going to be a very tough and probably a very effective Prime Minister. Yes,
Do we know enough about the Maori Party?
Well, they're cavalier characters, aren't they? They get away with saying things and doing things which mainstream politicians can't do and so on.
And
the media love that. The media love that when someone's got a bit of colour and a bit of soft spirit and character.
It is quite possible, I think, that even if National do not need the Maori Party in terms of votes, that they will try and bring them along with them anyway for the long-term future.
Offer them something.
What's surprising is Tariana and Key get on a hell of a lot better than Helen Clark and Tariana.
Winston, he's fighting the fight of his life to get out of trouble here, and he hasn't helped himself.
No, he hasn't. It's been unfortunate in all sorts of aspects. This is a man that I think has flashes of brilliance when it comes to politics. He's lost all focus on local politics, and also there's a sort of messianic quality that's sneaking into his approach now.
We're going to miss him, or the media is going to miss him, though. I mean, it's presumably he's not going to come back. Oops.
Well, exactly.
I mean,
he's proved us wrong.
That's right.
In 1999, we thought he was gone.
Never in circumstances like this.
Yeah, but Putin-like ability to survive and hang in there.
Yeah.
The Greens, by general acclaim, have run a wonderfully assured campaign.
You told me you were voting Green this time.
No, I didn't do.
That's the word around Whetstone.
That's what I heard, Richard.
Deborah, there was talk of John Key in there. Do you think that he has stepped up in the course of this campaign? Even if only presentationally, we've seen a more impressive John Key during the campaign.
He went into Parliament the same year as I did in 2002, and I thought he was just a yappy puppy, and, you know, he probably whittled on the carpet a few times. But as Richard Prebble said, you know, if you don't make mistakes, you're not doing your job properly as long as you learn from them. But I think the National Party are very lucky that they've found someone who has a naturally sunny disposition, which people respond to in these tough times, and also he is naturally a pragmatist. He doesn't have to pretend or do it for political expediency to flip-flop or to change his mind. He's someone who'll pick up a Labour Party policy and say, yeah, I quite like the look of that, but I'll just knock off this here and take this off and add this. And that's what he is like. He doesn't have to try and be like that.
Do you think it turned for him with that first debate? I mean, there was clearly a very clear tactic to talk over Helen Clark and not be bullied.
Not be Don Brash. But also remember back to the last election when he went up against Cullen on television, he was very good too. And he made Cullen get more and more introverted and bitter and nasty, which Cullen actually is not usually like that. He's quite a nice person, really. But John Key, he reacted very badly to John Key, and I think John Key cut his teeth in the last election in that debating thing.
Now, Lila, we also mentioned the Greens there, who by general acclaim have run a great campaign. Do they stand to benefit from that? The polls suggest that the campaign has translated into votes for them.
Well, given the lack of media coverage of any substantial third-party policies or issues or strategies, then it was down to their retail campaigns, their own advertising, to sell their message. And I think the Green Party have done extremely well in that. I mean, they've found an emotional base for their campaign, using fantastic imagery. They've told us what, you know, they want us to do if we vote Green and what it will mean. So I think that's, you know, they've used advertising to great advantage, but, you know, like other parties, they've neither had the exposure through the general media for their own positions, nor the scrutiny of their own positions.
While the Greens were all lovey-dovey and saved the planet, Labour went for a much harder-edged campaign this time. They went on the trust thing. Their advertising was quite aggressive. Did they have no choice but to try and go John Key on his alleged slipperiness?
They had no choice but to go aggressive. I mean, this is history. They're a three-term government. Hardly any governments go into 4 terms. So history was against them. And there was a momentum there. It had been 2 years since they'd led in the polls. So they were starting off way behind, you know, the first base, if you like. I think Richard Griffin is exactly right. They should have forgotten about John Key. I mean, John Key's campaign is all about change, and the only way to knock that on the head was to just keep flashing images of Lockwood Smith, Murray McCulley, Nick Smith, Tony Ryle. You know, this is not change.
Those people were well hidden in this campaign, weren't they? I was starting to miss Jerry Brownlee.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. And I think that in terms of their advertising campaign, they should have just forgotten. They should never have referred to Key. But the problem with Labour, and we've seen this with the Māori Party and Labour, these personal relationships, these personal animosities often get in the way. Helen Clark's got this animosity, perceived animosity with Tariana Turia. It stops them having a constructive relationship. The animosity between Clark and Key, and they plastered over it beautifully in the last and final debate, but it is real, it is tangible, and it got in the way. Clark felt she had to knock him off personally, and I just think that was a misstep.
Look, I think Labor made a mistake in going negative at all, either personally, directing it at Key or other National Party MPs. When we went out and talked to union members about issues, they were interested in the record of the parties, and that's all Labor needed to talk about in this election campaign. And by going negative, it particularly backfired on them with people's concern over the international financial meltdown. It just didn't feel right in the last 4 weeks to take that tag.
Deborah, before we go to a break, I wonder what you think of the ACT campaign. We had John Ansell on this show, and he made it clear he departed because it was like herding cats. What did you make of what happened without him there?
I think ACT has run a good campaign, but I think that it's always a mystery to me. I mean, there must be very few people in the country who haven't heard of Rodney Hyde now, but he never manages to translate that into getting up the polls. Why is this? I think it's because we don't hear any ACT policy. We don't hear about choice in education, choice in healthcare, all those sort of things.
Maybe it's because we do.
The more we said about policy, the lower we'd go,
Yes. Well, I'll leave you to ponder that while we have a break. And when we come back, we'll be back with more mains and more analysis.